One of the coolest times of the entire year to catch a bass is finally upon us, and that is the spawn, when the largest bass in your pond or lake are up shallow and they are ready to be caught. But in order for you to catch a new personal best, you've got to first understand some really key factors when it comes to fishing during this time of the year. So in this video, I'm going to teach you everything I know about bed fishing in several detailed sections, starting with my top 5 tips, some of those being sneaky tips for catching more bedfish. Next, I'm going to walk you through how to position yourself to catch more bedfish, specifically from the bank. Then I'm going to dive into general fishing tips during this time of the year, specifically how to bedfish without actually looking at them. After that, I'm going to move on to my 5 main lures for fishing when bass are on beds and why I choose those 5 lures to throw first. And to finish off this video, we're going to watch 2 bed fishing catches from one of my recent fishing adventures, and you're going to see in real time all the factors that have to line up perfectly to get these spawning fish to bite. My name's Tyler, this is a bed fishing masterclass, and let's talk about it. Throughout the years, I've noticed that every single fish reacts a bit differently based on, the bottom composition, whether they're in sand or rocks or grass, or if they're spawning, around a stump, or if they're spawning out in the open. Do not have the same lures tied on and never try anything else. I probably catch 90% of my bedfish on the same 5 to 8 lures, but the rest of those bedfish, especially the big ones, oftentimes come on a lure that I haven't thrown very often, that I'm just kind of experimenting with, and usually it's one that the bass hasn't seen before. So if you have a bunch of people flipping a Senko down the bank and flipping on the same bed with the same color Senko, of course, that fish is not going to bite yours, but if you flip in there with either a different color you've never tried before, that way you can treat every fish like a different situation. The second tip that I have for you guys is to not just throw the color white. I feel like for years on the channel, I told you guys that white was the best bed fishing color, and I'm going to go back and say that I was wrong back then. White is a fantastic bed fishing color, especially for soft plastics and jigs. It allows you to, in dirty water or deeper water, see your lure and see if the fish bites it. But one thing that I have gained so much confidence in over the past few years is being able to bed fish where you can either barely see the fish or see the fish, but not have to see your lure. And you go fully based on the feel of it. Just like you're fishing any other bait, that you're not actually looking at the fish, you're going based on feel, and you set the hook based on feel. And so that is one thing that I've learned over the past few years, is that white is fantastic, but so many people throw white rage craws on a bed, and I'm at fault. I throw it a lot as well, and I've definitely taught you guys to throw white rage craws for many years. And I'm not saying to rule it out. I'm just saying that I have thrown many brown, green pumpkin, watermelon, colors that actually imitate more of what the fish are worried about when they're spawning. They're worried about the bluegills. They're not worried about some white threadfin shad. Threadfin shad don't eat their eggs, and so they don't have to be worried about those. And so when I've experimented and tried lures that I can't necessarily see with my eye when it gets down there on the bed, I've actually found that allows those fish to be a lot more aggressive. It's a give and take with white or natural colors, but I found that just throwing white, which I think a lot of people do still, is a big mistake. The third tip that I have is going to be downsizing your presentation. And this is one thing that I definitely didn't do when I was first bed fishing, years and years ago. I would just throw the same lures and the same bait casting rod and reel combo with the same line diameter, line size. And over the years, I've learned, and it's almost kind of like a logical thing, is that if you're fishing a drop shot, you want to hook a giant fish. You want to hook a 10-pounder. And of course, maybe it's different because you're on the main lake, fishing a drop shot, as opposed to a 10-pounder on a bed is in a bush. But in most situations, throwing light line, I feel like when you're bed fishing, you have this thought that like, oh, I don't want to throw light line because I don't want to break them off. But if you're fishing just normal, not bed fishing, you never think about that. And so I have had so much more confidence the past few years throwing a Ned rig, a drop shot, a tube on a spinning rod than I have on a bait caster. And I think that decreased line size as well as the decreased lure size. And so downsizing your presentation won't just help you get a better hookup ratio, it also can trigger a fish that maybe has seen so many jigs, so many Texas rigs thrown at it, that as soon as it sees a drop shot or a Ned rig, something triggers in its mind that says, I can't stand that thing on my bed. So downsizing is definitely one of the most helpful things to do. Tip number 4 that I have is to do something that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when it comes to bed fishing, at least in my beginner mind years ago, and that was to blind fish for it. So don't actually get right up on the fish, put your polarized sunglasses on and look at it. That's a great way to catch them, and honestly, it's the most fun in the world. I have found that so many of those, especially bigger fish, that might stay around or near the bed, but won't quite lock on when you are near them. If you back away and throw, let's say, a weightless wacky rig, a weightless Texas rig, Ocho, it triggers those fish. They just, I think the fish know you're there. Of course they know you're there. They do know you're there. If you are power pulled down right next to them, or let's say you're bank fishing and you are literally standing 10 feet from them, the fish knows you're there. But I have found, even though it's hard, even though you want to see the fish, just like I mentioned with the downsizing your presentation, if you're fishing just down the bank every other time of the year, you're not worried about how long of a cast you'll make. You're not worried about setting the hook or missing it. I have found that those fish, if you back away from the bed, make a long fan cast way over it, way over the bed, and then pull the lure into the bedding area where you think it is, I have found that so many of those fish that would not bite when you were close will now bite and will also hold on for a lot longer to your lure than they will if you are close. So backing up is scary. It is hard to get your body to want to do because you see the fish and oftentimes they'll stay but they won't eat. But if you leave, oftentimes that will trigger them into eating. Now, tip number 5 is definitely an unconventional tip, and you may not have seen this one coming, and that is to not bed fish. You know, there's been so many times throughout my years of fishing that I really, really want to bed fish, and so all I think about for 2 to 3 months here in Texas is bed fishing, bed fishing, bed fishing, and I miss so many other amazing fishing times of the spring, whether it's the pre-spawn, whether it's the post-spawn, the shad spawn, a good dock skipping bite. I miss all that because I'm so focused on bed fishing. And especially in tournaments, I have killed myself in so many tournaments just because I really, really wanted to bed fish. And I would just say, don't force it. It's awesome, it's so much fun, but there are always fish biting somewhere else on the lake that you guys can go catch. The first thing you're gonna have to worry about with bed fishing is that, yes, it is a visual technique. So when you are bed fishing, you are literally looking at fish as they're spawning. And so you need a few key characteristics with the water clarity and the weather to line up perfectly to allow you to see those fish. And so the first of those being no wind. You can't bed fish with wind. I don't care, you know, maybe you can see a bed area and kind of flip or cast to it, but you will not be able to actually sight fish without almost completely flat, calm water. So today on this pond, you can see we have flat, calm water. So that shouldn't be an issue for today. The second thing you need is the highest sunlight you can. Right now, we kind of have an overcast evening, not really ideal. Hopefully we can make a few fish happen for you guys here. But sunlight, of course, allows more light into the water, which allows any sort of water clarity to become clearer. So if you're fishing in 2 to 4 visibility, it's gonna seem pretty clear under a super high sun day. And if you're in gin clear water and you have the sun beaming directly ahead of you, that is ideal for bed fishing. Now, the third thing you need to have when you're bed fishing is clear water. You know, I can hear the argument for being able to bed fish in non-clear water is definitely possible, but the clearer the water, the better, because you can actually see the fish more easily than you could in other water clarities. Now, I want to get fishing, but 2 more quick things that you need to bed fish is one, of course, a pair of polarized sunglasses. I was down in Florida the other week, and I was literally bank fishing, and a guy walked down the bank right next to this bedfish. It wasn't 2 foot from the bank, and it was a big white circle. Like, you could almost see it without polarized sunglasses. And I asked the guy as he like passed it, I was like, "You caught any today?" And I could see it with my glasses, and he was like, "No, I haven't caught any fish today." And without polarized sunglasses, it is very hard to see these fish, especially in a pond like today when the water clarity is not amazing. I think the water clarity here might be 2 foot or so, maybe 2 to 3 foot. And so you need a good pair of polarized sunglasses, preferably ones that have an amber tint, an amber, a yellow, a gold. That tint of a sunglass basically allows the most light transmission through the water into your eyes. I don't know if I explained that right, but those kind of lenses help you see in the water better. And then you also need to wear clothes. This might not seem very important, but in some scenarios, especially with big pressured fish, you need to wear clothes that are not super flashy. So if you just came off the blind, the deer blind, and you're wearing all orange, that is not, or I guess the deer blind, you don't wear orange, you wear camo. The dove hunting range or field, you're not gonna wanna wear those clothes because the fish, even if they know you're there, still want to feel a little more at ease. And so that is why I wear, maybe you can see it right now, just kind of natural colors. I'm wearing a tan hat, I'm wearing a light blue shirt, and I'm wearing light gray shorts. And I guess the reason for that is because I want to blend in with the background as much as possible. So if you're fishing a big grassy hill that has bedfish on it, maybe wearing green could be better. You know, I don't think wearing camo per se is the best choice, but especially if the fish with the, you know, their eyes on the top of their head are looking up at you, knowing you're there, they're not gonna wanna see a big old orange or red shirt. So I try to wear kind of the most neutral colors possible. But no more talking, I say we put the camera down in the water and I'm gonna explain the best that I can in the, you know, rabbit trails that I kind of go off on, an overview of what bed fishing is like and how to do it for yourself. So we've got the camera down on the bed. I doubt that you can see the two bed fish from here. You may be able to. I've got the camera on super view. But the first thing you're gonna wanna do when you're bed fishing, especially from the bank, and I guess from the boat it applies too, is stay as far back as you can. You know, those fish are gonna be a bit weary that you are in the area, and in order to trigger them into biting, because it's not a feeding response, these fish are sitting on an area, they are getting ready to mate, and so this is not a hunger, this is just kind of an agitation. And so in order, I think, to best kind of surprise the fish and get them into biting, you wanna be as far away as possible. So I know a lot of guys kind of back off the bed. I know some guys will like literally take a knee or sit down if they have, you know, the proper lighting and water conditions to see into that area. But of course, you want to kind of test out the fish. The fish are always going to be different. That's a constant with bed fishing, is that no bass on a bed is the same. And so you're going to have to use a little bit different techniques to get these fish to work. That's why it takes so long to film a everything you need to know about bed fishing video, because everything you need to know is a lot of stuff. So I'm going to talk about lures here in a second, but I do want to discuss kind of how to approach the bed. You know, every bed's going to be in a different situation. It might be on a big rock flat, it might be next to a stump, it might be next to a grass flat like we are right now. But fish want to spawn next to something. They want to spawn next to some kind of cover, because when they are having to protect their nest from invaders, whether it's bluegill or gobies or whatever, they want to have some kind of protection. That way they don't have to work in a full 360. I cast my lure in there, and what I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna let it sink directly on the bed. I let it sink off the bed. And the first thing I always try is a Texas rigged Strike King Ocho in the baby bass color. Now, the reason why I use the baby bass color over any other colors is because when I rig it, I can see the white of the baby bass looking down at the bait. But the fish, if the bait is falling at him, sees the green. So that's exactly why I throw the baby bass, and I just jigged it and he's looking at it. And I jigged it again, and here he comes. And is he gonna eat it, my first flip? That would be amazing. I think we got a male and a female in here. And they're both a little agitated, but they're not quite gonna eat. So I'm gonna cast it far off the bed and reel it in, because I don't want any sort of splash to trigger these fish that a bait is in the area. And then I'm literally just gonna let it fall right on the side of the bed. Boom. Actually, right there, I let it fall right in the middle. And so I see the fish coming in. I'm gonna kind of let them get settled in the bed. That's the best thing to do. Always let them get settled, and then hop your bait and make them react to it. So I'm gonna back off the bed a little bit more. These fish seem to be a little bit confused as to why I'm here. And with every fish being different, of course, I may have to use slightly different techniques for this fish than I might have to use another one. So this fish might react best to the Texas rigged Ocho. Some fish might react better to other baits. It's all a guessing game, and that's why you got to try a whole bunch of different things. Now, I do tend to think that most bass eat kind of, I don't know, the three main food groups per se. You know, a stick bait, a creature bait, and a shad or bluegill type imitation. But I have had situations where a bass eats a very specific lure that it won't touch anything else, and so you have to be ready in these scenarios to throw the whole kitchen sink at them. Man, bed fishing can be very, very infuriating, but in my experience, it is so much fun and so worth it. So when you're fishing for bedfish, of course, you're gonna find fish that are way more committed to the bedding area, and some that are not quite as committed. And it's just a kind of a crapshoot. You know, fish are gonna be very committed at some point during the spawn cycle, but right at the beginning and right at the end, you may not find that they are as committed to that area. And one thing I'm realizing as I'm talking about this, oh, that's gotta be him, come on. Oh, he stole my, no, gosh dang it. One thing I'm realizing I didn't talk about is what a bed looks like. So here's a picture of some beds from Google that I'll put on the screen with some dings, ding, 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 ding. That is what a bed looks like. A bed is usually an area that's whitened out or darkened out, depending on what the bottom composition is, because the bass is swept away with its tail. And then there's always gonna be an area, oh, there he goes. Oh, come on. Got him, yes, aha, get in here. So every area on the bed has one thing called a sweet spot, which is probably, I don't exactly know why it's called a sweet spot, but it's called that because the fish reacts to it best. healthy male fish right there. The female is probably, I don't know, a pound bigger or so. She's not committed to the bed. And so I found the area that was the sweet spot on the bed, the area that the fish reacts to a bait on the most, and absolutely gobbled it up. So thank you for biting fish. Now we're gonna let it right back in the water to continue spawning. There we go. Thank you, sir. Have a good life. 2 thumbs up right there. Can't really see the fish. It's in these low light situations that using a more whiter, kind of like brighter colored bait is better for bed fishing because you can see it. Most of the time though, I prefer to throw natural colors because that actually imitates what's down there trying to eat the bass's eggs. I don't like to use white and clear water. I used to preach that all the time on the channel, but I've learned that if you can see the fish, you can definitely see your bait. There's no need to use white. Right now, I can't really see the fish. And so the white little Z2 that I have on here is crucial because I can't really see the fish. So I want to see if my bait disappears in his mouth. Sometimes you actually have to like hit the fish with it. You have to get the bait close enough to their face, to their tail, to make them react to it. Because sometimes it sits there 2 feet away from them and you think, oh, he's gonna eat it. He's looking at it. But usually, unless they are actually agitated, they won't eat it. And the best way to agitate them is to literally get it in their face. Fish did not react. Well, in this scenario right here, folks, this fish is catchable. But is this fish worth our time? Probably not. So in that intro, I talked about the white spot. The white spot is that cleared away section on the bottom where the fish has made their bed. In an ideal world, you're gonna be able to see a perfectly clear water, a nice circular bed with 2 bass laying on it, and not a single other angler has touched those areas. And that is just not the truth for most cases, especially public lakes and public ponds. People fish in the spring like there's no tomorrow. Everybody and their dog is out there. And so it is possible that you're fishing for fish that have already seen someone else's lures, and or you can't actually see exactly where they are. So fishing down the bank might work during certain times of the year, but in this time of the year, they're gonna be on those certain little areas called beds, and that is the best chance for you to catch some big bass. And so in this situation, we have really clear water, which lends itself to the possibility, if you have no wind, of being able to sight fish for those fish. But in today's adventure, we have quite a bit of wind and a lot of clouds. Clouds and wind are 2 things that you do not want when you are sight fishing. And so what I'm gonna be doing in today's video and showing you guys tons of fish catches from is flipping my Texas rigged weightless 6-inch. This is the Striking Ocho. I call it a Cinco. I call a lot of things by the brand name. This is a Texas rigged Cinco on a 4-aught flipping hook, 20-pound fluorocarbon, a 7.4 heavy rod. You don't have to throw it on a heavy rod. I just love this rod right here. It's 7.4 heavy. And then any reel of choice right here, I have a, I believe it's a 7-8-3-1 fast gear ratio. And what you're gonna see here in a second when I hop on the front deck is I'm going to be flipping and making short roll casts to these white areas that I see in the hopes that those could be bass's beds. Now, 2 things to understand about these things that I'm gonna call white circles in this video. They're not always going to be beds, and not every single bass is going to bed inside one of those white circles. In fisheries all around the country, you're gonna find situations, especially for smallmouth bass, where the area around is all white and then the bed itself is black. And even in some largemouth fisheries, the bed itself is not gonna be a total white color. It might blend very closely in with the rest of the surrounding areas. Sometimes bass are gonna spawn on stumps, but like I said, today's situation is very niche. It is clear water, windy, but you have a bottom composition that lends itself to make white little areas. And so I'm gonna be flipping and casting to every single one in the hopes that I see a fish move off of one that I can see kind of through the ripple in the water from the wind, or I just catch the fish without even sight fishing. So technically I'm bed fishing, but without actually seeing the fish. I hope that made sense to you guys. I'm kind of sick of talking about it. So let's go on the front deck and show you guys a few fish catches doing exactly what I'm doing today, and of course how you can replicate it for yourself. I see another white spot over there. It kind of looks like it could have a fish. So, gonna make a long flip. Long flippity flip. No fish on that cast. Doesn't mean there's not one, but just didn't get him on the long cast. Right here we got a windy white spot that I saw a fish on earlier, but now we got a ripple and I can't really see what's down there. So, always keep your eyes peeled though. I'm always looking at the water in case that wind dies down and I can see the fish. But I'm just gonna make 5 or 6 flips at this white spot. See if this fish is still there. Really just feeling for the bite. You could call this sight fishing. I'm really just using my sight to find a good looking area, just like you use your sight to find a lay down or a lily pad. I'm just finding a white spot and fishing it a few times. Oh wow, that's the male. I did not even see this fish. The female's still in there. We are gonna grab, ouch, ouch, ouch. I'm gonna grab the male here, put him in the live well for just a second so we can get that female to bite. Didn't even know this guy was in there, he's so small. That was crazy. I literally saw that female right there, that bigger bass, advance towards my Cinco. And I set the hook when I felt a bite, and I guess it wasn't even her. It was the male. Oh, but she's a goner. I'm about to catch her. I'm about to absolutely put the smack down on her face. Oh yeah, hello. Hello, Missy. Don't worry, we'll catch you. We'll get you back on that bed. Well, now there's 2 bass on the bed. Where'd that guy come from? Look at that. Here's fish 2. Get in here. Yes, that's the female that I was looking at. And there's 1 more male. Better fish right there. I'd say that goes almost 3 pounds. And there's 1 more fish. All right, well, maybe that 3rd bass was just kind of the boyfriend that hangs around. Let's hop into my first lure on the list. My favorite lure of all time when it comes to fishing on beds, and that is the Spot Remover jig head with a white rage craw. This little doohickey right here, I don't know why it's so good, but I feel like it kind of satisfies everything that a bass could want on a bed, or I guess not want on its bed. It has a lot of movement in the rage craw tails. It's got a flat head, and so the rage craw can actually stick up, and it doesn't imitate a crawfish. It doesn't even imitate a bluegill. It's white. It doesn't imitate anything. The whole goal of sight fishing or bed fishing is to irritate that fish into eating. When they're making their nest, when they're spawning, they are not hungry. They don't want to chase down a lure and eat it. You have to present it in front of their face, irritate them enough to get them to bite. And so I feel like the white rage craw on the Spot Remover jig head is just a really, really efficient way to get your bait down there, because bed fishing is oftentimes a game of efficiency. You have to make a lot of flips and casts, bang, 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 bang to that fish before they finally get irritated enough to eat it. This is heavy enough to get that lure down there to make a lot of quick, repetitive flips to that fish, but it also has enough action and enough, I wouldn't say realisticness, whatever the term is, realism, that's the one. Enough of whatever I was trying to say there to get that fish to feel comfortable around it and eat it. Throwing a huge swim bait or a big soft plastic, like a big tube, a 7-inch tube, oftentimes that's just too invasive, and that fish will be like, all right, this looks nothing like what's gonna eat my babies. I'm not even gonna bother with this thing. And I feel like the size of this also leads to an incredible hookup ratio. I hardly ever lose fish on this thing on a bed, and I think that's because they eat it, as you'll see from some of this footage here in a second, some underwater footage. They eat it from the back, and that hook gets them in the roof of the mouth every single time. Like I said, I hardly ever lose fish on this thing, and it's really caught the most bedfish for me over the past almost decade of my life. Lure number 2 on my list, like I mentioned in no particular order for bed fishing, is going to be a Texas rigged Senko. Now, I don't think I touched on this in the beginning of this video, but I feel like I have to clarify. When I talk about bed fishing in this situation, I'm not talking about flipping around to white spots and beddy looking areas. I'm actually talking about looking at the fish. When you see a bass or 2 bass on a bed and you are actually, physically looking at them and you are flipping or casting to that area, that is what I'm talking about in today's video. The Senko, while being an amazing lure to just cast around to spawn looking areas, white spots, little holes in grass, things like that, it's also, for some odd reason, an amazing lure to flip and cast a bass to get them to bite on the bed. I'm almost always throwing the 6-inch striking ocho. I just think the 6-inch catches just as many fish and triggers a strike from a bigger fish than the 5-inch does. We'll talk about the 5-inch here in a second with the Wacky Senko, but the Texas Rig Senko is just a really good all-around presentation for those bass on a bed. You can flip it in there and you can really slowly creep it along the bottom. You can kind of hop it faster, and it really has a cool I don't know, it's not like wobbling down as the wacky rig wobbles like this. It kind of more like glides down, and for some odd reason those bass just cannot resist this thing. And just like every video here on the channel, all of my gear that I talk about will be linked in the video description. Please purchase your tackle through those links. It tracks your purchase to my account and helps me make a living. But now that we've talked about this, I say we move on to its cousin or its brother, whatever you want to call it, in the first finesse lure in my top 5 bed fishing lures list, and that is the Wacky Rig Senko. Now, I think what makes a Wacky Rig perfect for a bed fishing situation is that it has a slower rate of fall. I'll include the video linked below where I actually caught a fish not using the drone, but with the drone right above the bed. And that fish wanted the lure presented a little bit slower, and it wanted it falling from the top of the water column all the way down and taking a while to get there. Any lure that fell right by its face and drug along the bottom was not quite finessey enough for whatever reason for that fish. Every single bed fish is different. That's one thing you guys have to understand, and I'm sure I talked about it, and Nick talked about it in the videos that I'll leave linked below. But the reason why you can't just throw one lure at every single bed fish is because they're all in a slightly different stage of the spawn. And of course, just like humans, bass are all a little bit different. And so one bass that likes the spot remover rage craw might not like the Wacky Rig. And one fish that might not like the Wacky Rig might like the spot remover rage craw. That's honestly the really cool thing about bed fishing, is that every single fish is so unique, and you have to approach each one with all of these lures tied on or ready to go. That way you can be switching your presentation after every few flips. If the fish does not show interest in one thing, it might show interest in another. That's why I have a whole bunch of rods out in the springtime with all 5 of these plus a few more rigged up. But the Wacky Rig is just an amazing way to present the lure, the Senko lure, like I said, the 5-inch is the one that I use, in a way that's a little bit slower and a little bit more finessey. I usually use a weedless wacky hook for my Wacky Rigs, just because when you're bed fishing, you might be casting up around the side of a dock or next to a laydown, that kind of thing, and I don't want to get my lure stuck in and around the bed, because then you have to actually go close to that bed fish. You'll spook him off. Oftentimes, you'll spook him off for good, especially if you use your trolling motor in the area and kind of churns up the bottom. So anytime I can use a weedless that still gets a good hookup ratio, I'm going to use that one. And of course, I'll have this hook linked in the video description as well. Moving on to lure number 4 on my list for bed fishing, and that is going to be the weightless fluke. Like I mentioned earlier, when you're bed fishing, you're not necessarily imitating any sort of forage that the fish is going to be eating, because the fish is not usually eating. They are just eating or using their mouths to consume your lure out of aggression and defensiveness. But the one in my list here that I think does imitate something that fish could be worried about eating their eggs is going to be the soft plastic fluke. This here is a watermelon color, I think watermelon red flake. My favorite color for the springtime is any kind of watermelon variation. And the reason why I think this is different than the rest of the lures on the list is because it looks at least somewhat like a bluegill. Now, I don't know how smart bass are. We're probably giving them a little bit too much credit, but I have found that when the fish are in an aggressive mood, the best thing to get those fish to bite quickly on a bed, especially when those fish have been chasing off bluegill, is a weightless soft plastic fluke. I have caught some of my biggest bedfish on this, and as well, some of my smallest and hardest to catch bedfish. Sometimes you'll get a 1 to 3 pounder on a bed that just can't seem to get his mouth around any of the other lures that you have, but a weightless soft plastic 4-inch fluke, this here is a KVD caffeine shad in watermelon red. I just found this thing can get in that fish's mouth and gets a very good hookup ratio, especially when other lures cannot get the job done. And last but not least, my lure number 5 on this list, and honestly one of the most important ones to getting those very, very tricky bass to bite on a bed, is going to be the drop shot. I know it can be scary to throw a super light line presentation to a big fish that you can see. You see that 5, 6, 7 plus pounder, and you think, I don't know if I want to throw something that has light line, that's finessey. I want to throw straight braid, I want to throw a 20-pound fluorocarbon and really get a good hook set into that fish. Well, I can tell you guys, there's a lot of people out there in the springtime that are targeting the same fish that you are. And a lot of these lures, while they work well for me, they also work well for a lot of you guys too, and so the fish see a lot of these lures. Now, one thing that I do not think a lot of bedfish see is the drop shot, especially a medium to small size drop shot worm. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, bed fishing is a repetitive activity. You have to get your lure in front of that fish's face or in that fish's area a number of times until that fish finally becomes aggressive enough to eat your lure. Now, the cool thing about the spot remover Rage Craw, that's a good catch, is that you can flip it in there, hit them on the tail, hit them on the head, and go over and over and over, and hopefully that fish will eventually eat it. But the problem is, with casting and retrieving so much, you're wasting a lot of time, especially on a fish that might want something a little bit more finessey, and something that stays in its face a lot longer, and that is where the drop shot comes in. Because of the drop shot weight on the bottom of the lake, and your lure up top, you can literally just sit there and shake your worm up and down, and that oftentimes can get that very tricky bedfish to bite. I have seen so many times when I'll use every single lure I can think of on a bedfish, and they will just be totally closed mouth. They will not want anything to do with eating your lures, but as soon as you get that drop shot worm dangling in front of their face, literally, I've like hit them on the nose before, all of a sudden they'll go, and they'll eat it. Nothing else could have got the job done. They need that repetition in their face, and they also need something a little bit smaller to be able to easily inhale. And if you're losing fish on a bed on a drop shot, you are doing something wrong, especially on this drop shot setup right here, which I'll have the video linked below, exactly how I rig and work this drop shot. I wonder if he'll eat the jig if I flip it at him. This thing did not seem to interest him in the slightest. Maybe the jig will. Nope, nope. He is frantically swimming around, which makes me think I'm on his bed, but I didn't see him before I got here, so I don't think so. Gosh, homie is just like cruising around here. I want to see where he goes. I want to see if he's actually on a bed, why he's so committed to this area. There he is. Where are you going, dude? I think I've got to get myself above the bed because I can't see him now. Paddle into the slot up here. You have to be so specific with your sun angles. Yeah, that's his bed right there. That's his bed. He is just not that committed to it. That's the problem. Oh, I'm gonna catch him though. I'm gonna catch him though. I'm gonna catch his butt. He came back. He came back and he's looking. I'm gonna catch his butt. And I think his sweet spot, which is where he's either laid eggs or gonna lay eggs, or she will. I think I just found where it is. Let's try the Japanese deal. Man, it looked at this thing and backed away. So as soon as a fish backs away from something, you pretty much know not to put that one back in there. This guy's, he's looking more interested. Oh, I got him. No way. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I thought he was somewhere else in the bed. Heck yeah. Heck yeah, get in here, buddy. And they are so strong. You're not even that big. You're not even that big. Come on now. Come on now. Ah, I'm gonna flip you in. Flipping you in here. Heck yeah. Got him on the jig. Corner of the mouth. Outcast tackle. Juice jig. Thanks, buddy. Oftentimes, because this thing imitates a bluegill, people think a jig imitates a craw. Rarely. If you have crawfish in your lake and you're throwing the right color, I guess they can, but for the most part, it imitates a bluegill. And when they're on beds, it's what you want to be doing. There's one. I see you, my friend. I'm gonna back on up and pull down. Well, I'm a little close. We'll see if she gets used to me though. What happened there is I saw a fish. She was looking at me actually, and then spooked, so I power pulled down. I'm just gonna wait a second. Just gonna wait for that fish to get back in the bed, see if she's fine with me sitting here. Because eventually, you become an object if you don't move all that much. Just become an object to them and they don't get scared. They'll become confident in being in the bed again. I don't see her. I'm gonna flip in there and let my jig sit whilst I watch. Because I would like her to come back in the bed and my jig's already there. Not the other way around, not see her come back and then flip because she might spook again. There we go. She came back and took a quick look at the bed and then ditched. Don't know where she went. She was also higher in the water column as she swims through the bed, which makes me think she's not actually, oh, there she is. Gosh, got her. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Had to be patient. Had to be patient. I told you guys. My jig was already in there. I think I made maybe 2 flips total. and left the jig in there while the fish came back, felt the tick, and I got her. Yes, let's go. Let's stinking go. I mean, like roof of the mouth. That fish was not getting off. Persistence and patience pay off. Thank you, girl. See, if I kept on flipping in there, she would have seen the jig hit the water and go to the bottom, hit the water, go to the bottom. But I let my jig sit in the bed. It became an object to her. She got used to it. And then when she eventually came back and got comfortable in the bed, hopped it a few times, and it's like, whoa, what the heck is that? The object moved. And I caught it. Yes. Bed fishing 101. The oldest trick in the dang book, everybody, is that right there. Well, my goodness, folks, what a stinking video. Hopefully you enjoyed it and learned something to become a better angler. If you have made it all the way to the end and you're not subscribed to this channel, go ahead and hit that button for me. And if you want to see my jig masterclass that I just put out, that video teaches you everything you have to know about catching bass on a jig. I will leave it up here in the corner. My name's Tyler. As always, it's been a pleasure, and we'll see you guys next time right here on TRF.